How's it going? Thanks for having me. Or should I be more
I'm here.
formal and say good evening?
Over to you, Anant.
Please be as informal as you'd like. That's what we love about you, is that you somehow are able to say very intelligent things in a very informal way.
Thank you. So I should have worn a hoodie.
Yeah, you
A
could have
hoodie
won.
and jeans, and I could have had more credibility. That's the thing. If I'm wearing a suit, it just automatically sounds less smart. But if you dress dumpy, anything remotely intelligent sounds smarter.
You know,
That's my,
actually,
like, big
no, no.
conceit.
So, actually, what you're saying is very interesting, and you're saying it in jest, but it's actually so true. I think everything you do now is so loaded because everything is such is a very sensitive expression of identity. I mean, the fact that you're wearing a suit and you're not wearing a hoodie, or the fact that you're wearing a suit with white shoes and not like with the formal leather shoe, like like this is all, in a sense, an expression of identity now, right? Isn't? I mean, wouldn't you? I mean, it's like how you identify, how you want to be seen. It's so much more complicated today than it probably used to be, because I've been wearing this kind of a thing like for the last 20 years.
I feel like you're a therapist answering this question. I feel like this is loaded. I feel like it's a loaded question, and now you're dragging me into it, and you're not wrong. But I'm saying that because I only relatively recently, as evidenced by a photo like this, have been loving fashion and the story that it tells, and just a few months ago I had the chance to host the Lakme Fashion Week Gala here, and so it's only the last few years that I'm like, oh, what's the deal with what's the story that this designer is telling, or what's happening this season, or what can I wear with what? And by the way, I'm sure there's 100 people watching this just being like, I can't believe he wore that.
No.
So, but I appreciate that story, but I also think you're not wrong. Like, whatever you're most comfortable in is the thing that you're going to feel more confident in to begin with. I'm just trying to learn a lot more about that space.
But this idea of identity, if I can go down one step
Yeah.
further, you took a decision a long time ago to call yourself Kal Penn. And I learned preparing for this interview that Martin Sheen also isn't his name. I don't know if you all knew that. Martin Sheen's real name is Ramon or something.
Yeah.
And that was, I guess, so that he didn't get typecast, or you don't get typecast playing a certain ethnic role. But it's much more complicated than that now, because you're taking a decision not to call yourself, your full Indian name in India.
Oh, I actually think it's way simpler than what you're saying. So back in the day, yes, you're right. When I was starting out as an actor, this would have been like 1998, 99 kind of a thing. I did my undergrad at UCLA. I studied theater, film, and sociology. And when I moved, I was born and raised in New Jersey. So when I moved to LA, there was this, you move to LA obviously to get an education. You've spent time there, but as an aspiring actor, you try to find an agent as soon as possible. You try to get somebody to represent you so you can go on professional auditions while you're pursuing your education. And I had saved up for one round of headshots and a resume, and back in the day, everything was analog, right? So you literally there was a newspaper that you would get with casting notices. You could buy a book with agents' addresses and phone numbers, and you would save up for stamps and mail them a headshot and resume. And I did this for years, and there was no response. And there was one night in college, I had just saved up for new headshots that I had taken, and I was going to do a new batch of these mailings, and a couple of my college friends, half jokingly, it was one of those 2 a.m. conversations, said, you should come up with a screen name. And I said, what do you mean? They're like, well, think about it. And to your point, I don't think they mentioned Martin Sheen, but they mentioned Whoopi Goldberg. Whoopi Goldberg is not named, her birth name was not Whoopi Goldberg. I said, it's not? Like, no, think about it. Look at her. Her name is not Whoopi Goldberg. Her real name was Karen Johnson. I was like, oh, interesting. I didn't know that. I think they pointed to Chevy Chase, whose first name was Cornelius. So, could you imagine, Karen Johnson just doesn't have the appeal that Whoopi Goldberg does, or Cornelius doesn't sound as catchy as Chevy. So they said, what if you come up with something that's just like a catchy name? And I said, all right, what do you got? And so, Kal Penn was always shortened to Kal by both my Indian cousins and your Western friends. It's just like Rajiv becomes Raj. It's like that kind of a thing. So I didn't really think of it as that until they were saying okay, well, what about Kal Pacino? I was like, I'm not calling myself Kal Pacino. there's a baseball player named Cal Ripken and his son Cal Ripken Jr. So they're like, what about Cal Ripken Jr. Jr. Jr.? I was like, no, guys, this is all so useless. So then one of them said, well, what if you split your first name in half? So it's Kal Penn, but add an extra N, and that extra N stands for not going to play a stereotypical role. And I was like, oh, that's kind of fun. And so I said, it's actually not the worst idea in the world. Let me just come up with a screen name and send it out on that new batch of headshots and see if anything kind of changes. And nothing really changed. There are versions of this that I've read online that are like, and then Kal Penn said everything changed and Hollywood is racist. I'm like, no, that's not what happened. But so that batch of headshots was sent out, and again, nobody responded except for one agent, and she was wonderful. She became my first agent, and I auditioned for her. And eventually I asked her, I said, what was it about my submission? Was it that the name sounded more Western or palatable? Was it that the picture, by the way, you don't have it on here, but like I should have sent you, if I knew I was going to tell the story, it's the cheesiest headshot. It's like very late 90s, like I'm looking like that. It's like that kind of a picture. And so I'm like, was it the cool picture that gravitated towards this for you? And there's no clear answer, right, at the time. It could have subversively been one of those factors or multiple factors. But the simple answer is then when you start working as an actor with whatever screen name you just sort of stick to that name. Yeah. So it doesn't necessarily make sense and I've never changed my name legally. Obviously, today I don't think I would have made that same calculus, which is wonderful. That's like, it shows you how much the goalposts have changed. But the irony then to your question is it's actually quite simple. Like, you're not going to use a different name when you start working, no matter where you are in the world, if you've already been like established as a screen name. But also on the contrary, like when we did the Namesake, I remember in the credits of the Namesake, I said to Mira, I'm like, hey, I play this guy Gogol Ganguly, who's I think his birth name was Gogol, and he changes it to Nikhil in the book and in the movie. I said, wouldn't it be kind of fun if like Kal Penn played Gogol and Gulpan Modi played Nikhil? If I could do like 2 credits at the end, and she was like, yeah, that's awesome, let's do that. So there are these like little tidbits that I like to play around with.
But I'm going to hang on to one thing you said over there, that if you had to do it all over again today, you wouldn't do that. You wouldn't change the name now.
No, I mean, I don't think you have to, right? I don't think that whole calculus would necessarily happen in the same way. People still, of course, come up with screen names all the time.
Yeah, but not for the reasons you did necessarily.
No, right. I think the calculus in 1998 in figuring out a screen name certainly had an element of is the name more catchy?
Yeah.
And part of that catchy definition in 1998 is it more palatable when there are only a handful of us who are out there? So I just feel like that's you can never use, and I would apply this to comedy, I would apply this to politics, I would apply this to so many kind of social barometers of like, it's easy to use a 2025 microscope and be like, should have done that in 1998. I was like, well, sure, if we're using a time machine that nobody has. Yeah. But I love that times change,
Yeah, but you obviously broke that glass ceiling, and you were the first to do that. Get all, you were very successful at doing that. But is identity today more or less complicated than it was when you started off? And I'll tell you why I'm asking you this question. Just, I think, was it a week ago or something? Priyanka Chopra, who is, we all really admire how she's made her way into Hollywood, and and done it in a very conscientious kind of fashion. She is now getting baited for how desi is she. Right? Like there was this, I couldn't believe, I was like, firstly I thought I was shocked I was spending time on this, but
I was about to ask you, I'm like, this seems like clickbait that we all get sucked into.
No, I know, but honestly the reason I was spending time on it, I knew I was going to talk to you about it. That's what I thought about. Yeah. But so she was asked to choose between various food items. Yeah. And she was asked to choose between an empanada and a samosa or something like that. Yeah. And she was thinking about it, and then she chose the samosa, but then she chose a hot dog over a vada pav or something like that. And apparently, all hell broke loose, because now the audiences are saying she's trying too hard to not be desi.
Are audiences saying that, or is one editor who's trying to get clicks saying that?
So you tell me. I mean, is that something that you think about, or you think like somebody like her, or people like people who have not locally from America have to think about these things?
Here's the example I'll give you. And actually, let me just correct you on something. I'm very grateful for having been one of the first South Asian actors
Yeah.
in certain positions. For example, Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle was the first time that two Asian American men were able to headline a studio comedy. But I really have to give my flowers, like I'm going to overuse a phrase that's cringeworthy at this point, but I stand on the shoulders of so many Indian and sort of South Asian diaspora actors who are older than me, 5 to 40, 50 years older than me, whose names you probably don't know because they never had the opportunities that I had. And I feel like I had those opportunities because of the doors that they kicked down for me.
In Hollywood?
In Hollywood. And so I really whenever I very much appreciate what you said, but I feel like I just need to mention that because it seems like, there was just a light switch overnight,
Yeah.
or like I remember when Aishwarya Rai was on Oprah, like that was exciting for all of us.
Yeah.
But there were so many people who were like, cool, we did it, right? We've arrived. I was like, who? Aishwarya is on Oprah. That's so cool. That does nothing for my acting career.
Right.
Right. So I feel like we always have to be careful about have we made it definitions.
Yeah.
But I'll answer your question. The food question is a funny one because, a few years ago, I got this. I love to cook, and I got a call. My agent at the time called, or my manager at the time called and said, "Hey, do you want to be on MasterChef?" I was like cook on TV? Absolutely not. And then he's like, well, it's for charity. So it's like a cook-off between you and another actor. And they'll go over the recipe with you before. It is a game show, so you raise money for charity, pick a charity. You can rehearse as much as you want with the chefs and the people on this show. It's like, so it's all BS? Like, no. Once you clock in for the actual episode you're shooting, you get no help. But they'll work with you on the recipe and everything. I was like, okay, awesome. So I said yes. I committed to doing it. And so in one of the pre-interviews, they're like, what's your favorite food? I was like, oh man, tacos. I would love to cook tacos. And they were clearly disappointed in this Zoom, pre-Zoom, so the Skype meeting. They were clearly disappointed, right? And I was like, oh no, I feel like I know what's coming. They're like, what other foods do you like? I was like, well, tacos are absolutely my favorite. And I'm like, I know you're going to go with burger. You're going to ask me to cook little burgers. I'm not going to cook tiny burgers for you. And they go, do you think you might maybe cook a chicken tikka masala? I was like, oh, I see where you're going with this. No. My favorite food is tacos. Well, could you cook something Indian-y? And then I was like, you know what? No, I'm not actually going to cook something Indian-y because then do you not like Indian food?
Yeah.
I was like, no, I love Indian food. Do I want to get my mom's recipe and cook it on your show? I had thought about it. But now definitely I'm not going to do that because tacos are my favorite food and I'm just going to crush some tacos. To learn tacos from scratch because I have access to these world-class chefs who are going to teach me how to make a tortilla from the flour and the water. And so I went with that and it was just kind of I'm reminded of that with this conversation because it's sort of just, to me, it's the silliness of are you not allowed to love other things? Yeah. So, but I also understand there's, people will always project when you're in a position in the public eye. People will always project their own likes, dislikes, their own insecurities. And that just kind of comes with the territory. So I just try to laugh it off. I don't know this example particularly, but it's I've always tried to laugh it off.
But we'll do one more piece, identity, then we can move on. But, is it something you think that South Asian actors have to think about? I mean, you don't, and you're very clearly, you're born and raised there, and you kind of, but somebody like a Priyanka, there are 3 other people who want to move and kind of think. Do they have to think about more about how much to assimilate versus how much to differentiate? Because end of the day, Priyanka she sounds very American when she speaks, right? She doesn't sound like Sophia, what's her last name?
Vergara.
Modern Family,
Vergara, yeah.
or even Salma Hayek does, right? These are people who are much more, wearing their origins on their sleeve than probably some of the South Asians are. Would you agree to that?
I couldn't possibly weigh in on somebody else's experience. I know and love Priyanka and find her to be completely authentic and wonderful in who she is, and unapologetically so, which I think is really refreshing. I think the root of your question, though, I can relate to in the sense that, for me at least, this conversation manifests itself also in the diaspora, right? Even though those of us who are not born and raised here, I get this question of what does your authenticity mean? And I remember even as a kid, and I'm going to sort of, you know, I mean, you all know this when you have relatives who were maybe born and raised in India, and like, and this isn't just Indian, this is any immigrant group.
Yeah.
Like, the moment you leave the country you were born in your head, the clock stops. So like your association with identity is where the clock stopped for you, your moment of emigration. And so for a lot of my parents' friends, this idea of what it means to be Indian in America in the 90s, when I was expressing my interest in the arts, I would hear this from like folks in the community of like, no, you can't study acting. Beta, we're Indian. I'm like, what? What does being Indian have to do with having an interest in the arts? It's like, no, engineering, medicine, these are the things that Indians do. And obviously the root of that is that Indians were allowed into America post-1965 because there was a labor shortage of professions like engineers, doctors, et cetera, which is why those were the only people who were allowed in to the US, or at least in the biggest numbers until the 80s. So what I was receiving, I didn't have the vocabulary for this in high school. I just was like, your classic teenage angst of like, why are they equating being Indian with what I want to do? Yeah. But then that's also passed down to kids. So my generation, I remember at UCLA, there were Indian students, Indian American students, who would say, literally they would say, I can laugh about it now, but it was like, it bothered me at the time. They would go, oh, you're a theater and film major? Pff, you're such a sellout, man. Like, you're a sellout. Like, why don't you do something Indian? Like, why does my major have anything to do with your life,
Correct.
number one?
Correct.
But like, number two, how is me wanting to be a storyteller or an actor, a filmmaker related to anything you do? And so it was whatever that chip they had on their shoulder, whatever that insecurity was. Yeah. But I also, I would get it then as I started working, you know, as an actor. Obviously I hear things about the screen name or stage name, but even the roles that you take, right? We just did an interview, a digital interview backstage, and one of the questions was like, okay, what's a role that you regret, right? So same sort of thing. It's like, okay, 2025 lens. Yeah. Are there roles like, I did this movie, Van Wilder, one of my first films with Ryan Reynolds, who's fantastic. But I played a fairly stereotypical Indian exchange student. And it's your very classic, like, early 2000s teen sex comedy, right? And so a lot of times when I do university lectures, I'll get a question from some very well-meaning 20-year-old kid who's like, so on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you regret playing? And by the way, but just for reference, the name of the character I played, let me talk you through this. Do we have time?
Yeah, we have time.
Let me talk you through this. So I get this call. This was after the agent who signed me with that new batch of headshots, right? She called me very excited. She said, there's a huge audition for you. And like any other profession, any other job, and put yourself in the late 90s, early 2000s in Hollywood, any profession, right? You need credits on your resume and your CV in order for anybody to take you seriously for that next job. And so what she had explained to me for a while was it's really hard if you're not white or black at that time, especially because there are very few credits you can get on your resume. Nobody's going to go out of their way to cast you unless a role at the time was specifically written Indian or Indian American, and those were few and far between. So she called me very excited. She goes, there's a supporting lead role in a teen comedy, and you're perfect for it, and if you book this job, it's going to open so many doors for you. And I said, this is very exciting. She goes, come to my office, and I will give you the script, and we can talk about it. And I was like, well, why don't you just like email me the script? If you're this excited about it, I am too, and I don't want to wait. I don't want to sit in traffic for an hour going to your office. Send me the script. No, you have to come to my office. This went back and forth. So she finally agreed, okay, if I send you the script and you read it, like, you still have to agree to come to my office to discuss it before the audition. I said, fine. So she said, I'm emailing you the script. I said, what's the name of the character? She said, the name of the character is Taj Mahal. So I hung up on her. She called me back. She's like, I had a feeling you were going to hang up. I was like, look, I can tell you without reading the script exactly what this is about to be, and I don't really have an interest in it. And then she explained again, like, look, to build a resume and get your foot in the door, it's your choice, obviously, whether you want to audition for this or not. And long story short, I auditioned for it. I decided to take the job. I worked with the writers and the director on trying to find jokes that weren't just based on the guy's name or where he's from. And really, it's a teen sex comedy, right? So most of the jokes are not based on identity. And identity jokes tend to be the most boring anyway, 20 years ago and even today. Yeah. But I get this question a lot when I do these these interviews from college kids on a scale of 1 to 10. How much do you regret doing that project? And I'm just like, first of all, you're welcome. But second of all, like, had I not done Van Wilder, I would not have had the chance to do Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. And the reason for that is that there was no shortage of Indian origin actors to play Kumar, and they auditioned people in LA, New York, London, Toronto, Miami. One of the reasons that I got that part ultimately was I think I was the only one on the short list who had had a studio film credit on his resume because I had done Van Wilder.
You had to
I'd
start
played the role
somewhere.
of Taj Mahal, right. But so you make, we talked about business earlier, you make the investors more comfortable if you've already had a credit on your resume. Had I not done Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, I would not have had the chance to do The Namesake, which is still today probably my favorite project I've ever had the chance to do. Mira Nair was a role model of mine when I was a kid. She was one of the catalysts for why I wanted to be an actor. The reason I got that audition, I wrote her a letter, and I said, look, The Namesake is an incredible book. You have to let me audition. And it just so happened that her 14-year-old son at the time, who is now, you know him as Zoran Mamdani, who will hopefully be our next mayor of New York, but he was a 14-year-old fan of Harold and Kumar at the time, and apparently was telling Mira before bed every night, like, hey, Mom, you should audition Kal Penn from Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. Showed her clips from Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, and she apparently watched them and goes, Beta, this is clearly not the right guy to play Gogol in my beautiful film. Until she got my letter and said, okay, what the heck, because of Zoran, I have to let him audition at least. And that's how I ended up getting the film.
This is fascinating. So Zoran is the reason you got Namesake. I mean, that's...
It's the reason I got the audition.
Wow.
And we can talk about that more in detail because I assume it might be of interest. But the point of that story is, in all of these questions about identity, it's of course very easy to look back. And I would say this to that 20-year-old college kid. Do I wish my first job was like a Chris Evans style, like jumping out of a helicopter with a machine gun saving good guys? Yeah, of course. Yeah. Look at me. That wasn't going to happen in 2000. It might not even happen today. Yeah. But of course, yeah, do I wish I had like this weird time machine that would be like, you know what my first role should be? Yeah. Sure, but I have absolutely no regrets because I'm so glad for the trajectory. I'm so glad for how the goalposts have changed, how much Hollywood has evolved, and I'm really proud of the roles that I've had the chance to play.
And we get into how much Hollywood has evolved also, but a quick answer. So am I right in reading that you don't feel a lot of pressure to represent Indian culture in Hollywood? That's not something that you think of, you don't want to think of?
No, I think those are two different questions. I wouldn't say, so questions of do you feel that there's pressure, do you make choices based on that pressure are sort of separate things.
Yeah.
If I were a purist living in a vacuum, I would say I only make decisions based on the artistic merit of what I'm being asked to do. But just like everybody, I have a mortgage, right? And it used to be that like my definition of success as an actor is, can I pay my rent just from acting? And then it's like, holy cow, I'm actually able to build a life around this. And I have the good fortune and the privilege of like, okay, you have a mortgage or you have a car payment or you have this or that. Right. And so that will, like any business person, that'll continue to graduate. But I don't think that you have to make those decisions as if you're not mindful of what it means to never see people who look like you on screen. Because when I grew up, I never saw people who looked like me on screen, and it's an old, tired story at this point. But like, really, Sarita Chaudhary in Mississippi Masala, one of Mira's first films, was the first time that I saw a South Asian family, an Indian family especially, I mean, Guju Indian family, that was not a one-note character. I mean, these characters were flawed, and they were racist, and they had financial problems, and they fell in love, and all of the stuff the three-dimensional stuff that makes humans humans. So of course, seeing that for the first time, I am mindful of what that means, but that's sort of what, maybe the sweeter side of what I mean when I say, I understand why we project our hopes and dreams and insecurities on somebody who we perceive to be in a position of power. But I also try not to let that be, like, especially if you're using social media as the metric, like, I feel like if we're all people pleasers, you remember like, I'm a data nerd too, so like I try to sit in the dial group, focus groups for the things that I'm in. Yeah. And I love watching the data, but like, something could test incredibly well. 98 people can love a joke, and I'm just fixated on like, but 2 people hated it. Why did they hate my joke? Why did those 2 people hate my joke? Those people will always be there. Art is subjective. So I'm mindful of that, right? Like sometimes it's just a faceless person or a bot
Yeah.
that's like trying to tell you you're doing something wrong. So I think it's,
Okay.
I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question.
No, I mean, it does. It does to a large degree. But, let's come to something else. We said art is subjective, and we keep hearing about art being subjective. And but do you sometimes feel, and I'm asking this in a slightly loaded way, I don't mean to, but I don't know how else to phrase it, that it's become too subjective? There was a point in time where you would look at some form of art, a Bharatanatyam dance, or you would look at something and you would say, this is objectively beautiful, that nobody can deny that this is beautiful, right? And now we've come to an extent where everybody is finding their own definition of beauty to an extent where it's become so democratized that it's actually making the business of art almost unsustainable, because something that was for hundreds and thousands of years considered beautiful is now doesn't work for me, and like this random dot in a white canvas is now art, and this is now going to be worth millions of dollars. So is there something that is there a way it becomes too subjective?
I hadn't thought about this before, so I'm just sort of off the cuff because I don't have 10 minutes to craft a thoughtful answer here. But I feel like, at least in the content creation space, people are taking less risks, right? And that's why it's the perception that the lowest common denominator is the only thing that's being made now, at least in the States, right? There's it used to be that, especially in independent filmmaking or even studios, right, they would, even if you're a naysayer, you might say, oh, they were throwing money at everything to see what would stick. And in the process, you would get really interesting art. And it should be subjective, and not everything needs to be for everybody, and I think that's great.
Yeah.
I don't need everything that I do to be for everybody. And the stuff that I consume is like that too. I'm also not precious about like the stuff that I watch or the genre of things that I want to be in, if I like a script or if I like a story. So I think one of the challenges that we're facing now is that if something doesn't appeal to what the business leaders or financiers think it should appeal to, then it may not get financed or greenlit. And that's just sort of the reality of it. I hope that changes, because I think that's where you see the more interesting content. I don't know if that answers your... What do you mean? Like the...
Is there anything like... Do you consider objective beauty a reality, or is all things beautiful, is all things artistically beautiful only subjective?
Maybe both. Maybe it depends on the situation.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I did not want to sit directly next to my parents at the Harold and Kumar premiere because the first scene I'm like naked from the waist down and the shot is from the back, and I just didn't need to sit next to my parents for that.
Yeah.
So like, not everything is for everybody.
Yeah.
But I'm deeply proud of that movie, and it was interesting I remember hearing I'm not deflecting this, I just remembered this story. My mom, when I was home, I overheard her talking to my Masi on the phone. And I could only obviously hear her end of the conversation, but the gist of it was like, she was being asked, was that movie like Van Wilder? And my mom was like, nah, ma lead role che. And it was like, okay, so we're ignoring the fact that they're hard R, like teen sex, marijuana comedies. And there's just like pride in the fact that I have a lead. I was like, all right, okay, this is progress. We're doing well. Even though she had to sit next to one of my friends during the premiere, I'm like, maybe I could have sat next to my mom during the premiere. So I don't know. I think it is subjective to some extent, but we can find beauty in things.
Specifically with comedy and with comics, right? It seems to me, I mean, Stephen Colbert has been taken off air now. Comedians in India are not having it easy, as we were talking briefly about, just before this. It seems to me that comics have also taken such extreme positions that the middle ground they've left, in a sense, vacant. Do you think, like, firstly, what are we doing wrong? Where are we going wrong to the extent that being a comic is becoming so dangerous or so loaded now, in these two largest democracies in the world?
Let me just call Veer Das real quick to give you the answer to this question. I'm not a stand-up comic, right? I've dabbled.
You are
in
a stand-up comic, but
trying.
You're a very funny person, and you've made jokes in the past, and the genre you've acted in. I feel like you're familiar with that genre, the funny genre. So
sure. I mean, look, I don't know. The stand-up comics whose work I enjoy most are people whose voices are authentic. That doesn't mean that I have to have their lived experience. This is my take. Obviously, people will disagree. It doesn't mean I have to share that lived experience. It just means that I can find that form of storytelling vulnerable, authentic, really fun to watch. One of my favorite stand-up comics right now is a guy named Shane Gillis. Shane Gillis is so funny. His last Netflix special is probably my favorite like stand-up special ever. I don't have his lived experience, and that's one of the reasons I love it. Obviously, I'm a big Veer fan, and I'm the like ABCD/NRI guy who like mostly gets his stuff, but I don't have his lived experience. But we have more shared experience than I would with a Shane Gillis. But I love Veer for that reason. A guy named Daniel Sloss, hilarious stand-up comic, very thoughtful. I just find that form of the authenticity of storytelling to be really special. I can't speak for other folks. My reaction to things is like, if I'm offended by something, it's generally because like, oh, well, we made that joke like 20 years ago. Like people ask this question a lot of, hopefully we'll do a fourth Harold and Kumar one day. They've made a deal with the writers. They don't have one with the actors yet. I hope it happens. But sometimes I get this question of like, don't you wish you could like do Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle today? Like you could never make those jokes, right? I'm like, why do I want to make jokes I made 21 years ago? I already made those jokes and I loved making those jokes, but it's not 21 years ago. I want to make jokes that are funny to an audience now.
No, but the people you're quoting, I mean, their lament is that it is no longer. I mean, people are getting more and more intolerant rather than tolerant, or rather than thick-skinned about.
Okay, I feel like, but this is across the board with a lot of things. We were talking about this backstage, but like, so my take is like, okay, if I don't like something, I'm just gonna like, maybe I'll mute the person or like, oh, that dude kind of sucks. I'm just gonna unfollow him. But then there are a lot of people who are like, oh, yeah, I was offended by that, or like, I didn't like that joke. Should I unfollow that dude? Or should we kill him?
Yeah.
Let's go kill that guy. I'm like, whoa. Where did we jump from like, I don't like that to like, let's go take his life? So if that's what you're getting at, I don't understand the jump from this to that.
You've had a vantage point inside the White House, so you've understood you've understood citizens in beyond audiences, right? Like you understood like voting citizens. Do you see this as something that's happening around the world? Maybe not just in India or in America, but just around the world, that we just get offended so much faster, and that somewhere we're not able to be open to hearing something we don't want to hear. I mean, you can mute, but you don't have to go around trying to get a show taken off air just because you can.
Well, look, I say all of this from an immense position of privilege, literally on a stage that can be a soapbox, right, for these conversations. I think the root of what you're asking sometimes, especially in the political world and political outrage, comes down to a feeling of powerlessness. So if you feel powerless, and if you feel like somebody who you have revered or respected, or maybe you don't respect them, you just expected better from them, and they're not standing up for something that you feel powerless about, I can understand where that rage would come from. I think we're seeing that sometimes when it comes to comedians or when it comes to art, but we're also seeing that when it comes to the way that our discourse is around politics. And I don't think that's necessarily helpful, primarily because I think it takes away the notion that we do have power. And again, I'll say this with all the privilege in the world, but one of the reasons I wrote my book is that I didn't grow up thinking that either Hollywood or Washington were things that were accessible to me. I viewed them as monoliths that people who were like me were not allowed to have access to. I don't think that's true, whether you're a Republican or Democrat in the States. I don't think that's true. I think we do have, especially in democratic institutions, although democracy may be being dialed back in pretty significant ways, and that contributes to our feeling of powerlessness. I think when we have this feeling that we don't have power, it makes us disengage even more, which is a shame, because then it becomes self-fulfilling.
Self-fulfilling, and you think this is the global trend, or is it? Or are you speaking only about America, or you see this in India and America both?
I can only really speak as an American of what I'm experiencing.
And does art suffer in this trend?
I think it can suffer, but I also think you said like, groups of people who are like trying to get a show taken off the air. I just think that's a generally egregious example. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen for good or bad reasons. There are plenty of examples where that actually does happen. But I just think that generally, we often mistake being canceled for the free market no longer wanting to watch something, right? And so like, and a prime example of this is there are so many comedians who are like, oh, this person got fired from this show, they got canceled. And then you're like, okay, but they're selling out a 40,000 seat stadium for their stand-up comedy, making $30 million a year. Like, if that's called getting canceled, I would love to get canceled. You know, so I think sometimes we like misunderstand what that means, but then other times you're like, you know, like you'll have a stand-up comedian who's making a joke that's regressive and that pisses off a lot of people. I understand why that pisses off a lot of people. But I also, as a relative purist, in a sense of the American version of free speech and the way that that's protected in our Constitution, is like, ideally, I would like to be able to defend your right to say whatever it is you want to say, even if that bothers me. You know, but again, there's a lot of privilege. We talk about this in the political world a lot, where, you know, like try to have a beer or two with somebody who disagrees with you. Don't have 10 beers with them because then you'll be fighting. But like have a beer or two. But that's still a relative position of privilege to have if you're talking about like, I'm not going to say that to a trans man who is having an argument with a Republican who doesn't even believe in that guy's right to exist. Yeah. What do you mean have 2 beers with that person? Yeah. Right? I feel threatened for my personal safety and the fact that I am alive. So I'm mindful of that too, is like, oh, sure, Kal Penn says just have a beer with somebody who disagrees with you. So I just think there are degrees to what you're asking.
So, but where did you see that this pushback on wokeism? Did you think about when that's kind of started? What created it? This extreme kind of pushback against wokeism?
I don't even know that that's a real thing. Do you know what I mean?
You don't think so? Okay.
I don't know. I think these, you know, the right has done such a great job at creating this concept of wokeism and convincing everybody that which bathroom your neighbor uses is tied to the price of eggs. Right? It's like the biggest distraction in the world is like the right has done a wonderful job at making people think that these things are all things to worry about. Meanwhile, they're doing nothing to lower the price of groceries, to lower gas prices, to bring people together. It's just everybody is a new scapegoat so that they don't actually have to address the challenges that are facing us. And the left has not done a great job at addressing them either, which is why they lost the last presidential election. But I think that's a lot of it's a big distraction that when you're looking at politicians who have actually tried to put a handle on it, they've been winning. And I say this with full disclosure as like a guy who's obviously secularist, farther to the left of most people than Democratic Party, et cetera, et cetera.
You volunteered with Sanders also, with Bernie Sanders also?
Yeah, I volunteered with Bernie. Obviously, I'm heavily biased for Zoran because he got me the job in the Namesake. But our politics also align in some things. I don't agree with him on everything, of course. You'd be insane to agree with every politician on 100% of what they believe. But it's an interesting time for that type of organizational politics because you've got folks who are offering at least a blueprint of ideas that I think we should pay attention. Objectively, I think we should pay attention to, even if you're only a tech person who's looking at something like AI, right? Whether you love or hate AI, you realize the projection of how many jobs AI is going to be responsible for sort of taking away. What's our public policy solution? Yep. Public policy moves way slower than technology. Yep. So unless you have politicians who are thinking about it, and I think right now the only two, if I'm even remembering this right, there are like only 2 politicians in the U.S. at a national level who have even talked about AI because they've understood technology. The rest of them are just like listening to like low-level staffers and lobbyists. So like there are things like that we like. Those are real things that you need to keep an eye on. So.
I'll get one sort of Hollywoodish question in, and then I'll get to the rapid fire because I've got a lot of questions rapid fire. I couldn't edit too many out of them. But, okay. Is liberalism receding in Hollywood as well, or is it as intact as it always was?
Was it ever intact?
I'm asking you.
No, I mean you're talking to somebody who I remember early in my career. You know, I was told by plenty of casting directors and producers, and they mean what I'm about to say as a pejorative. Okay, so I'm an American, born and raised in the States, and they would say, you know, you should really go back to where you came from because you'd probably have incredible opportunities there.
Yeah.
I was like, in New Jersey, there's not a big film industry in New Jersey. And obviously, I knew what they meant, and so I never really associated Hollywood with actual progressivism. I think if you're talking about liberalism, it's the same liberalism you see that's supporting Biden and Harris in their assault on Gaza, which is not that different from Trump and Vance's assault on Gaza. So if you care about human rights, you know, you see a distinct line, but I don't really necessarily see one with liberals in general. If you look at what the Democratic Party has been doing on that particular issue, if you look at what the Democratic Party has been doing on wages or taxation with a select few states, they haven't really been wonderful in the same way that true progressives have been. So I don't necessarily, for your question on like, is liberalism dead in Hollywood?
I phrased it badly, but is it less or more or same?
Hollywood is obviously a more liberal town than like Wichita, Kansas, obviously. But I think what I'm getting at is nuance matters a lot. I remember when I am mostly an actor. I only took a few years off to work in politics. But I remember when, you know, I had started working for Obama in the primary that led up to the general election. So at the time, it was Obama was running against Hillary Clinton and John Edwards and a bunch of other Democrats for the nomination. And I had this one particular guy who should remain nameless, but big Hollywood producer, really kind, always enjoyed working with him, continue to enjoy working with him. But I remember he called and he said, hey, a bunch of us are thinking of throwing our support behind Obama. We've really donated a lot to Hillary Clinton. But I need to ask you, because you've been working on the Obama campaign, if he wins, is he only going to nominate black people in his cabinet? And I just sort of laughed and I said, I don't know, I hope so. And then I realized this guy was serious, that this was a serious concern for some reason. And the only way I could answer it was by saying, like, well, look, I can tell you that my experience is that the then senator is hiring the best, most qualified people in positions in his campaign. And so I think the end result of that is you'll have a more diverse cabinet than we've probably seen before, because you're actually having somebody who's tapping into qualification over identity and over legacy. But that really jarred me, but it also wasn't surprising, because my experience in Hollywood was, especially when it came to race or identity, was fairly regressive. So I don't necessarily, I don't know exactly how to answer that question of liberalism in Hollywood, because I don't really think it was quite there.
But Hollywood would always paint to the world a very clear picture of the American dream, right? Like you get a house, you get a station wagon, you have 2 kids. That whole American dream, and that actually became the world's dream.
Totally, I love those stories.
Right, and the whole world would have a similar ambition. Honestly, with the soft power and the hard power, because it was financially obviously a very lucrative way of living. Do you think in all the past polarization and just all the negative news we keep hearing about America from around the world, I mean, the world hears about America, has the attractiveness of that dream, you think, become less?
It sounds like you're trying to tell me it has. No, I don't know. Artistically, I think we're still. I'm still trying to make the types of stories that I love, which are, what I like about comedy.
Yep.
And we already said it's subjective, but what I like about comedy is you can make a joke that not everybody finds funny, but B, there's the option that like you and your crazy uncle that you disagree with about almost everything can watch the same movie together and still laugh. Like that's the soft power kind of unifier that I still think probably exists. I think the question that's TBD, which is always the case, is are people equating what's happening politically with the American people?
Yeah.
Right? Are those viewed as one and the same, or are they not? Generally, they have not been. If you look at our audiences in, everywhere from, you see clips coming out of Iran and people's feelings about American movies that they've watched, or I've been to Cuba a few times. The first was on an official delegation, and technically American media products at the time weren't allowed in, but people found a way to get them. And you land at the airport in Havana, and people just shout "Película hamburguesa" to talk about Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle. I'm like, how did you see this movie? And it's not just my stuff; it's the type of content that we're. So I think that's a big open question still. Are people equating regressive politics in either party with the American people? I hope not.
Yeah. I'll just do one last question before we get to rapid fire. You mentioned your grandparents marched with Gandhi. They were part of the freedom. So they contributed to freedom. They were activists. If they were alive today and they saw India in the year 2025, what is the one thing they would like that they're seeing and one thing they don't like that they're seeing?
I feel like they'd be like phone thi gaadi bola bhai.
For the only person in the room who doesn't understand Gujarati, sorry, what did you say?
I feel like I know you're looking for a serious answer because you were citing freedom marches and stuff, but I feel like they would be like, you can call a car with your phone?
That's it.
Yeah.
And the one thing they wouldn't like?
You can call a car with your phone?
Okay. Okay, let me start. I'll do the rapid. Okay. If you had the opportunity to work with Rahul Gandhi, would you take it?
Like in a movie together?
No. So that's a no.
That's it. I just said in a movie together. We have a lot of cameos in a lot of our movies.
Okay. Okay. You've acted in Designated Survivor. You've represented the White House. Which role was more scripted?
Oh, wow. Look, I am primarily an actor. I'm very proud of having served my country, but I love being an actor more than anything, and that was definitely more scripted.
The White House role was more.
No, the Designated Survivor. You're literally working off of scripts. Yeah.
Okay. Your advice to an Indian student preparing to go to college in America with an F1 visa in a few weeks. One thing they need to worry about, one thing they don't need to worry about.
Do they already have their visa, or are they still waiting for their appointment?
They have their visa. People who already have their visa.
Okay. Then I'm sure, if they already have their... I was just talking to a friend who's about to start his grad program in the States, and it seems like if you're in that position, you already have all the answers, right? You've been told by the consulate that you have to unlock your social media. So obviously delete anything that you think might be problematic. Unfortunately, as a free speech advocate, it pains me to know that that's the truth of what we're dealing with right now, because I'm not so sensitive that I think we need to be policing people's thoughts. But it's things like that. But also I would say, there is, despite all the news, there's so much support in the U.S. right now for immigrants, both documented and undocumented. And I'm a New Yorker, and I think if you look at the way that New York is rallying around our neighbors and our friends and the people who make the city run, regardless of their status of their papers or whether they're students or doctors or waiters or whoever, we all share the subway together, we all walk down the street together, and we're really all looking out for each other. So take advantage of that sense of community, because it exists there and it's not showing up in the papers.
Okay. The one thing that disappointed you about Obama or his legacy?
Oh, hindsight question, man.
With the 2025 lens.
2025 lens, there's so much that I think he would even say, like, I wish we could have gotten X.
You obviously joined him because of something that you felt, you believed.
Yeah, look, there was a lot. Look, the things that I joined for, that I saw through, like I was only going to do a year at the White House. I ended up staying for 2 years because obviously bureaucracy moves very slowly. So the Affordable Care Act, which was our version of at least an approach towards hopefully one day having universal health care in the U.S., it was a step towards hopefully achieving that goal. There was something called the DREAM Act, which would have provided a pathway to citizenship for undocumented young people. That failed by 5 Democratic votes. So there were things like that I wish we had gotten through. Look, if you're asking for more specific questions, I can point you to huge conversations. My friends who run the podcast Pod Save America talk about all the time. We were on the absolute wrong side of what has led to the American-funded genocide against people in Gaza. Both political parties, including the Democrats, continue to fund it and continue to vote to fund it. That's abhorrent. It's a mistake. We don't need to be doing that. It won't lead to a two-state solution. Goes without saying, what happened on October 7th was horrific and inexcusable, and what's happened since is also inexcusable. But I think those are things that I wish we were better on. I wish we were better on the arts. I mean, there were things that we did so much on, this delegation to Cuba, for example, but I wish we had codified a lot more of what it means to fund the arts. I think we caved to some political accusations from the Fox Newses of the world, circa 2009, who were saying that the Obama administration was trying to politicize the arts. Now you look at the current president, who's basically gutted public funding for the arts, for journalism, for NPR, PBS, and you just sit there going, I wish we had made those institutions stronger, and I wish we were less naive about how quickly you could dismantle them. So there's like a long list of things, I think, like in hindsight.
It's really funny that, as 10 years ago when you came to India, you came on a much nicer aircraft.
I sure did, yeah.
And you came, and I was watching that interview to prepare for this one, and
Yeah.
you were talking about economic cooperation between the two great nations.
Yeah.
And like literally yesterday's newspaper was talking about the 25% tariff on India.
Sure,
So-
yeah. How's that going for us? Well, you're talking about, what he's referring to is I came as part of Obama's second delegation. So,
delegation.
yes, flying on Air Force One and doing press in a pseudo-official context versus being able to wear this and tell you my actual thoughts is different.
Okay, the one thing that feels alien to you about India, and the one thing that feels alien to you about the United States.
Oh, man, these are fun questions. You can, everybody says like, oh, you can get anything at any hour of the day or night in New York City or LA or whatever. Like, okay, that's true. But like, you can literally, last time I was here, I had a cold and I was at a friend's house and he's like, oh, you need some, Himalayan Septinil, whatever. And like, right, you need all these things. I was like, yeah, I'll get them. And he goes, oh no, we'll get it for you. And he just like does two things on his phone. And we continue to like sit 6 feet apart and I'm having some like tea. And there's a knock at the door, like literally 6 minutes later. And the thing that he talked about is there. It's been delivered. So I'm like, that feels really foreign to me. Because the level of engagement technology, obviously the setup for these companies, I don't know how they work. I'm sure in the comments section will be all of the information about how terrible they are for somebody or the other. That's all valid. But so that's one thing that we just don't have.
And what's alien for you in America?
I think what's alien is probably seeing a lot of the reaction of our friends and neighbors to what's happening in the world is on both sides of it is like, what I said for the advice about Indian students who are coming, there's such a strong sense of community that I've seen that's really reassuring. And in a sense, some of that is really foreign because if you're only paying attention to the doom and gloom of the news, you're sort of thinking the world is ending and things are really bad without seeing the people who are rallying around immigrants or standing up for human rights, especially with this famine that we've created, or around the way that we're treating immigrants, by the way, undocumented, documented, green card holders, US citizens. So that both feels foreign and also feels reassuring that I don't think hope is lost, that we need to continue to, especially those of us who are privileged enough to be citizens who have Republican friends, who are friendly with people in the current administration and feel comfortable having those conversations over 2 beers, not 10. To continue to do that and hope that dialogue leads somewhere.
Okay. The one thing that the Democratic Party should have learned but didn't after the thumping victory of Trump.
Dude, they have not done a true look at what went wrong. The DNC was doing testing of everything except what the candidates themselves had done wrong. And it's in some ways a no-brainer. If you look at, I'll just bring this back to Zoran as one example because it's the most recent, right? But for a Democratic Socialist to win the nomination for the Democratic Party for mayor in New York City with a huge coalition, like there was data that came out today, it was like he won 67% of Jewish voters under the age of 45. He won huge numbers of South Asian voters across the spectrum, Hindu, Muslim, across economics. He won every demographic of white voter, if I'm not mistaken, right? So all of the things that Kamala Harris and Joe Biden struggled with, you've got a Zohran Mamdani who won in New York City. And New York went for Trump by double digits over the previous election. And it's not because people suddenly decided that they were conservative. It's because they looked at who is offering solutions for the fact that groceries are too expensive and that I can't afford to live in the city that I love. And they didn't see the Democrats offering anything. They saw Trump offering a version of the plan that he's obviously since abandoned. He's abandoned these people, which is why Zohran was able to capitalize on that and say, here's my plan for actually following through. But so I think that's something the Democrats have not done. They're pointing fingers at everybody except themselves, or maybe I should say ourselves. And so I just think, as of now, it's going to be a missed opportunity.
But is your answer the candidates? Is your answer coming down to the fact that the candidates were wrong to be against Trump?
No. I'm saying that candidates need a plan.
Yeah.
You need to offer people a plan for what's affecting their real lives.
Okay.
It's an affordability crisis.
The messaging was wrong. And
The policy was also wrong. It's not just the messaging, it's the policy itself.
Okay.
I mean, all my grievances that I've rattled off policy-wise, I think apply as well here.
Okay.
Yeah.
The one difference between the right-wing movement in America and the right-wing movement in India.
I need to learn more about the right-wing movement here. You're asking a guy who just got his OCI card. I'm not answering this question. I need to keep it for a while longer.
Okay, the one stereotype you hate about portrayal of Indians in Hollywood.
Oh, man. You know, thankfully...
The top one.
Thankfully, this has changed. But I will say that any stereotype generally stems from a character that's not fully fleshed out, right? So just the fact that that stereotypes are just not you're not allowed to be a full human being, and now that's changed a lot, right?
Okay, I'm going to actually jump to this question because it's relevant now.
Yeah.
Is the first thing that comes to your mind when I mention the following representation of Indian culture in Western mainstream entertainment? Okay, I'm going to just first thing that comes to your mind, short answers. Slumdog Millionaire.
Oscars.
Okay. Apu and Simpsons.
Regressive.
Dev Shah in Master of None.
Oh man, very relatable.
Okay. Raj Kutrapali in Big Bang Theory.
Really fun.
Okay. Parvati and Padma Patel from the Harry Potter movies. I'm not sure.
I have not seen or read Harry Potter. I know it's a crime.
That's the headline today.
That's the
Given the
I need to,
story.
yeah.
Okay, Kelly Kapoor in The Office.
Oh, so funny.
Okay, all right. So
Yeah.
none of these, except for Apu, has actually made you think that wasn't fair or not, shouldn't have. You're happy with all of them.
I mean, I wouldn't say it that way. I would just say they all seem to exist in a space that makes sense. And by the way, the Simpsons thing is fascinating to look at. I just remember just being like, there are choices to hire Indian actors to play those characters or those voices.
Yeah.
I don't think the solution should be let's get rid of Apu.
Yeah.
I think you can hire some brother to voice him.
Yeah.
You know, people change. This sort of also ties into my favorite acting teacher would always say some version of, actors don't own their characters. Their characters belong in the ether of the art, right? So I think because of that, it's you can easily, or the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. The actor who played the mom in that switched after the first or second season. And so for a couple episodes, people were like, wait, and then you believe it because it's suspension of disbelief. So it's just things like that. So I don't know, I also think these goalposts change all the time. People would, when Harold and Kumar first came out, people were saying, well, this is so groundbreaking, it's challenging stereotypes. And then as the years went on, you had a new generation of kids who were like, that was so stereotypical, he had to be a doctor. I was like, really? 15 years ago, y'all were excited that he was a stoner. And now you're fixated on the fact that he had to play a doctor, So I think these things are malleable in a way. And the actors you mentioned are all fantastic, and I know them all personally, and I will always root for them and their success.
Okay, the one comic in America you admire who doesn't vote like you.
Oh, well, I don't know how people vote.
I mean, I feel like comics especially they wear their vote on their sleeve.
Not knowing how he votes, I'll go back to Shane Gillis.
Okay.
Because the way I would word it is, it seems like we come from very different worlds, and I value his take on the world, And it seems like the take that a lot of my Republican friends also enjoy. Let's put it that way. But I don't know how he votes.
Okay, Neil Patrick Harris, John Cho, Ryan Reynolds. If you had to bring any one of these of your friends to India, who would you bring first? You can only pick one.
I mean, John, I'm closest to, so you always travel with the person you're closest with.
Okay. The one joke you...
He's also Asian, so you have to explain less. You know what I mean?
All right. There's a story of you kind of almost having offered to take President Obama to a strip club.
No, that's not correct.
No, okay, good.
That took me a second, sorry. So you're setting up a few clickbaity items. I see what you're doing. I'm not mad about it. There was a barber when I lived in DC, when I first started my White House job. There was a barber a few blocks from the White House, and I had kept a real lid on the fact that I was taking this sabbatical. I was taking a break from acting. Acting is still my first love, all of that. So when I started my job at the White House, it became a news story that I very naively, and there are a few instances of this in my life, but very naively didn't think was going to be like a big story. And so I walk into this barber shop, and this barber was like, "Oh my gosh, you're Kal Penn," and just starts having a conversation with me about the White House and like, you know, I'm not just a barber, I also own a tapas bar. I was like, "You own a tapas bar? I love tapas bars. Like, a little bit of food, a little munchies, have a couple of drinks." And he said, "Well, you should bring your whole office." I was like, "The Office of Public Engagement? You know, we're not allowed to accept free drinks or anything." He goes, "No, but you should just come to my tapas bar. I'll hook it up." And I said, "Well, we're going to have to pay." And I was like, "Okay, awesome." He goes, "How many people in your office?" And I'm like, "Oh, like 40 people. And he jokingly was like, "You should bring the Obamas." And I was like, "Well, I'll see what I can do," knowing full well that like, I'm not going to invite the president out for a staff drinks at a tapas bar. And then he gives me his card after the haircut, and it's like, I can't remember the exact name, but it was like Ronald's Topless Ladies. I was like, "Oh, a topless bar. Okay, no, I thought, sir, that you said tapas, like little finger foodie kind of things, not topless." So then because I was new at the job, I walked in and I had to tell our ethics officer at the White House that like, I just want to make sure, in case this ever becomes a news story, that I did not, in fact, almost take anybody to a strip club or a topless bar. The opposite, in fact. So I'm disclosing this to you. Yeah.
All right, cool. Your view on Elon Musk?
Don't really have one.
Can I give you options?
Sure, yeah.
Genius-
Complicated is the...
Genius, opportunist, genius first, opportunist second, or opportunist first, genius second?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, don't they all go hand in hand at some point? Not just with Elon Musk. I don't know him personally, but like,
Okay.
when you get to a certain level, it's all intermixed, isn't it?
I just thought that for
Also,
any-
sorry to interrupt you. Isn't that the case for any of us? Like, of course, a guy like Elon Musk has way more power than the common man or you and I, even with like degrees of privilege. But I feel like a lot of us are like, "Oh, this choice that I make will have no impact," when in reality, especially in a capitalist society, any choice we make has some impact. I'm not comparing the choice I make to like the influence that an Elon Musk will have, but I feel like for a guy like that, it all goes hand in hand, right?
it just, you know, I felt that this question was relevant to you because of the Democrats he was at seemingly quite close to at one point. Then he had five Democrats didn't invite him, and he just became this person who was surprisingly got political, and now he wants to start his own party, and it's just, he seemed to at one point be kingmaker or at least king enabler, and I mean, you know, that election would have been very different without Elon Musk's involvement. I don't know which way it would have gone, might have still gone the same way, but it would have been a very different election.
Like, I mean, my take on that is he's a colorful guy. I don't think there's any absence of influential people who have been donors or supporters or have worked on political parties in either political camp in the States and sort of globally, right? So I don't know that he is a colorful guy, and I think that's why we're fixated on him. And I think it's not that different from President Trump, right? If you look at his successes, a lot of the things that he accomplished, previous Republican administrations had on their list of what they wanted to get done, whether it was overturning Roe v. Wade, which is women's right to choose in the states, or any number of economic policies or social policies. Republicans, since Nixon or previously, wanted those things done, and Trump got them done. We're fixated on his personality, and I think Democrats, to a fault, are trying to like replicate his personality, which I don't think they should do, because Trump is an Emmy-nominated reality TV star. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to create story and how to get, what we call earned media instead of paid media. He's really good at that. And he's a colorful person. Elon Musk similarly so. So I think sometimes that takes away the focus from real oligarchy and influence that folks like Bernie Sanders or AOC talk about a lot, is like, hey, let's not be distracted by the shiny thing, and let's actually look at like how many hundreds or thousands of Elon Musks there are out there using their influence, and how people together in a real democracy can put a check, or a balance rather, on that check.
Okay, some advice here. The secret behind the popularity of Korean TV dramas.
Oh man, I ask my cousins this all the time, because they're just good. They're juicy. They're fun. Everyone's hot.
Okay, so is there one thing that you think Indian television can learn from Korean television?
Oh, I love both. I'm more versed in American television, obviously,
Yeah.
but okay, Korean TV. And somebody help me with the name of the show, because I've only seen a couple episodes. But I think it's like the woman who accidentally parachutes into. What's it called? Yes, Crash Landing, right? So in grad school, I did one of my theses on Juche, on the North Korean philosophy of government. So I was like really into the concept of this show. We already said, like, I'm not precious about genre, right? So like, I got to know Asit Modi the last couple of years, and did a set visit to Tarak Mehta Ka Ulta Chashma, and I was like geeking out over this, like one of the most watched shows on the planet, right? And it's not everybody's palate. That's very different than like a Delhi crime. But if you look at like what India is turning out and the spectrum of voices and content, I'm like, man, this is so cool.
Yep, 1.4 billion people, 500.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Like I want to be on both shows. Like I would love to do episodes of Delhi Crime and Tarak Mehta.
So interesting, just some trivia for you.
Yeah.
There are more than 500 news channels in India.
Okay.
There are more than 141,000 registered publications, newspapers, magazines in India.
And sometimes those news shows have all 141,000 on one screen yelling at each other simultaneously. Yeah.
But there are just two companies that control all of entertainment.
Okay.
It's very interesting right now, television entertainment. Okay, but so you said Tarak Mehta. So Tarak Mehta or Kyunki Saas Kabhi Bahu Thi, which one, if you were to choose one episode to watch, you got time, which one would you pick? The new Kyunki Saas Kabhi Bahu Thi or Tarak Mehta?
This is hard because, so Hindi is not my first language, it's English and then Gujarati. But one of the ways that I started trying to learn Hindi was through episodes of Saath Nibhana Satya. Because the access of like, the level of Hindi is accessible to somebody who's learning Hindi, right? And they're like super addictive, ridiculous plot lines. So I'll have to go with like a Bosas story.
Okay, all right, fine. The one thing you learned from Irfan Khan.
Oh man, he was incredible. I think the power of communicating through silence, and he would do this throughout a lot of his scenes. But the one in particular that I remember, the two in particular I remember, is there's one scene where I'm in high school and he comes into my room, into Gogol's room, to give a copy of a book of the Nikolai Gogol collection of short stories. And he just uses silence to convey so much of what his character is thinking and doing. Did something similar in a scene where we're in a car and he tells Gogol about the origin story of his name and why he's named Gogol. And there's very little dialogue in both of these scenes, and he was just such a beautiful, generous performer who we all miss.
Yeah. Zoya Akhtar, Karan Johar, or Meera Nair? You got to do your next.
Oh,
next film.
dude. I love them all and I know them all, so like.
So you got your next.
I want to work with all of them. I mean, I already worked with Meera. I would love to work with her again. I have to pick one.
You'll pick one for your next film. You got offers from all three.
Yeah.
Got to pick one.
And
lead character Che.
Lead character Che. તો જે વધારે પૈસા આપે એવું લઈશ. I'm a Guju after all.
Okay. The biggest difference between shooting in India and shooting abroad?
The structure's a bit different. Yeah, I just think the rules are a bit more strict in the States, and there are a bunch of reasons for that around the way unions operate, the way the unions are covered. So it's just different, but I like it's not like I don't view it as one is better than the other. I'm always amazed at the way that both kind of come together.
But as an artist, you're able to adapt, and it's not that big a difference in terms of.
It depends on the project. I mean, there can be quite a large difference. I remember doing a film here. I know you're reading my book right now, so I don't want to ruin anything for you. But there was a film I did years ago, not The Namesake, where like, you know, the rule in the U.S. and maybe here to some extent is like, you know, your salary should go into an escrow account before you show up on set. You can't touch that money until you're done with the film, but that way, like, you know, the money's there and nobody can screw you over. And I, against the advice of my agents, got on the plane, came to India to shoot this film, and
You said it's a movie in America.
a movie in India,
A movie in India, and the money goes to an escrow account in America.
It should go to an escrow account in America.
Okay.
But I said, look, in good faith, even though the money's not there, let me just come. And so I came to India and went through the rehearsals. The money still wasn't there. I started shooting. The money still wasn't there. And at one point, some of the Bollywood actors in the project said, like, hey, you know you're not ever going to get paid, right? I was like, no, I am. They're like, no, one day just don't turn up and you'll get paid. I was like, no, I can't do that. I'm a SAG actor. That's our union. I'm like, I'm under
Actors Guild, yeah.
Screen Actors Guild. I'm under a union contract no matter where I am in the world. I can't do that. So the weeks kept going by, and they're like, dude, you're legit just not going to get paid. So with like 3 days left to go, I told everybody on set, I'm not coming tomorrow until I get paid. And the crew was like, yeah, finally, good for you. And the producers were like, okay. And so that second to last day, there's a phone call, sorry, your car is ready. And I said, no, actually, I'm not coming today. You can let the driver go. I haven't been paid. And so then like 10 minutes later, one of the financiers calls, like, Mr. Kal Penn, कोई problem है? I'm like, नहीं, कुछ problem तो नहीं है.
कोई problem है.
Problem नहीं. I'm like, नहीं, कुछ problem नहीं है. I just haven't been paid, so I can't come to work. And we had some strong words after that. And he just goes, okay, just wait in your room. In 2 hours' time, my boy will come. I'm like, in 2 hours, your boy will come. Okay. Now, I will say this as like, they sees no matter where we are in the world, we're like never on time for anything. And literally 2 hours on the dot, there was a knock at my hotel room door. And I look through the people and I can just see the top of some child's head. And I was like, oh, he literally sent some boy. I'm like, okay. So I open the door and there's like a 58-year-old man who's like 4 feet tall, wearing a shirt with a picture of a panda on it. It says, I love giraffe. And he's holding a brown paper bag and he hands it to me and he just goes, count it. And I was like, all right, do you want to come in? And he goes, no. So I closed the door and I counted it, and it was like half of what the guy owed me in cash. And the phone rings and he goes, Sab theek hai? And I was like, actually, this is just half of what you owe me. He goes, yeah, the other half you'll receive tomorrow. I'm like, okay. So I put the money in the safe, fully expecting it to like not be there when I came home from work, right? Fully expecting like somebody to steal my kidney when I get there. And it was just fine. Like I was 4 hours late to work. The crew was like, yeah, finally, like you did what you had to do. The next day they were just ready with the money. Obviously I had to then I had to go back to the States with this cash and declare it and fill out all these forms and whatever. That doesn't usually happen in the States. I'm not saying that happens regularly here anymore, but like there's colorful stories like that. If you're looking for like a juicy, how are things different story, I'll give you that one.
I'll tell you where I wanted to also get with that question was every time I go to LA, and I went to LA, I was visiting my friends after many years, a couple of months ago, and I go every couple of years for some reason or the other, and I just see so much more sort of plastic everywhere, right? Like I just see, I mean, I don't know, like if you walk in all the, the Beverly Hills and the Hollywood area,
Yeah.
Everyone's got a lib job. Everybody's got all kinds. I mean, it's just getting, and it's not only in LA. It's also more. But I feel like more on like in the show, the showman part of the city. And I see that happening in other cities as well. Is that something that you think is again like a new trend? And is that something that you think? I feel like it's catching on all over the world. It's catching on in India as well. That we had this huge hit right now. It's a film that did 400 crores. The movie's name is Sayara. Sayara's movie name. And the director said that he wanted to cast 2 young leads who had the main qualification was no work done on the face. and you got the. Is that something you think is different? Again, like different or in more extreme now? And
So are you asking me because it does or does not look like I've had work done? Like this could go in either way. You're either saying I'm handsome or you're being like, since you're an uggo, how do you feel about the plastic surgery question? I have not experienced this. I think obviously there's some truth to it if somebody's saying that. But I also I don't know. I haven't experienced that as much. I think the version of that I can kind of relate to is there's, you're always told in drama school, like your instrument is your body.
Yep.
So the expectation of you is to be as malleable as possible through your vehicle for your work that you're doing. So when you hear about like actors going on crazy diets, and sometimes it's a crash diet, sometimes it's not, like, are you washing your face and moisturizing every night in the way that like some of your friends who are accountants maybe don't do? Yeah. Like, yeah, there's all that stuff because you need to take care of what you're doing. But that extra level of stuff, I don't really know folks who have, maybe it's stigmatized and people don't talk about it. It sounds like people talk about it though, but I can ask around and get back to you.
Okay. All right, we're going
Wait, but what's your answer? Is it because I look good or I look like a...
No, I thought because you've A, you've got the
Careful.
experience,
Yeah.
and B, you're somebody who's, I feel, a very authentic person. So that's why I asked you that question.
Thank you.
Okay, let's get some audience questions in. I'm going to put Amish on the spot. I just saw him, right. Amish Tripathi is a famous author, and it's a privilege to have him with us.
Yes, thank you
Amish,
for being
please.
here.
Hi,
Priyanka,
pleasure.
then.
Hi, Kal Penn. Wonderful listening to you.
Thank you for being here.
The question that I have is, and as Indians looking at Indian Americans in the US, it is perhaps the most successful community out there, right? Educationally, commercially, in every way. Overrepresented at the top of corporates, banks, tech, even in politics now, right? The only place where you don't see Indian Americans, forget about overrepresented, we are underrepresented, is in the entertainment area. So what is it? Is it that not enough Indians are trying it, or are there things holding them back?
I think it's a couple things. So the root of the question is an interesting one, right? If you look at a lot of that demographic data that you're talking about, it's undeniable. There are successful Indians in all of these professions in leadership roles. Some of that is coming just from the maturity of a generation. So like I was saying, my parents' generation, that post-1965 wave of immigration was the first time that you had a concentration of South Asians as a whole, but Indian Americans in particular, who came with this access. They worked hard. Everyone's dad came with $12 in their pocket, mine included, and a bunch of student loans, but they had the opportunity to work hard. Then this 1980s wave of immigration was family reunification. And so those are like a lot of working class folks that we talk about far less, that for some awful reason are still stigmatized. So blue collar jobs, people who are making our food, driving our cars, doing all of these things that because the data set is collected only by asking, tick this box, are you Indian American or are you South Asian? You put both of them in the same category and we end up ignoring parts of the community that are really struggling. So I just feel like it's important to acknowledge that because it skews the data a little bit. But the answer to your real question is, why haven't we seen this level of rise? I think we have. It's just slower because the immigration pattern for the US was not based in the arts. So it lags a little bit. But if you look at leadership in arts professions now versus 10 or 20 years ago, it's leaps and bounds better than it was before. And you have so many people who are running a lot of companies. I mean, everyone talks about Bella Bajaria. She's incredible and wonderful, and essentially runs Netflix. Stuff that Mindy Kaling, Priyanka are doing, things that I do with my companies and trying to finance projects and voices. There are so many. We're not all at the same levels, and things fluctuate, and sometimes things are like a roller coaster. But I'd actually argue it's if you account for the fact that the immigration pattern was a little bit slower for those of us in the arts or that accessibility, I'd say it's like, if you account for that, it's kind of on par, it feels like.
And is it different for India and Pakistan, or is it all the same?
I'm not going to say it's all the same in this room. No. As you know, now that Trump fixed that whole conflict, no, I think there's a lot of solidarity in the U.S., especially
Yeah.
amongst artists,
Yeah.
because this concept of what it means to be Desi in the diaspora, there is a shared experience.
Yeah.
You know, there are of course still some of the divisions that exist on the subcontinent, and I think if you see things on social media, you can see that a lot of that's very true. But I think there's also an undercurrent of the same stigmatization that we all go through as Desi artists, regardless of country of origin. And it's not just India versus Pakistan. It's, you know, they're Nepali filmmakers and designers and, you know, Sri Lankans. There is a more cohesive, I think, unit than you might otherwise think there would be.
By the way, yesterday, literally like yesterday, I think like early this morning, the White House is demanding a Nobel Prize for Trump.
Oh,
Yeah.
all right.
You
Well,
hadn't heard about this. I wanted to get your.
I have. I mean, he had gotten nominations before by several folks, right? Like Pakistan nominated him once, and then who nominated him after that? There was like,
Well,
who did? Is there? Okay, right.
okay.
Yeah.
Priyanka, please. Is there any filmy question first? Because I know I've not done justice to the film part of the conversation.
Hi, so I wanted to check with you, are Harold and Kumar ever coming to Mumbai? And which aspect of the Indian life do you think can feature in, you know, maybe like the 5th edition? 4th is, I think, already underway, right?
Well, so the 4th we're hoping to make. They have a deal with the writers. They don't have one yet with the cast, but hopefully they work all that out with the teams and suits, and we'd love to do a 4th movie.
So what's coming in the way? Is it the Gujarati?
No, it's nothing like that. It's just the process of, I think, of getting it done.
Okay.
So they first you make deals with the writers, because if they're not there to write a script, we have nothing to do. As much as I love that character, he's cooler than I will ever be. It's written, all 3 movies are written by these extremely talented, wonderful guys, John Hurwitz and Hayden Schlossberg. So I'm so glad that they have their deal done, and hopefully we'll get ours soon. In terms of coming to Mumbai, I don't know, hypothetically, if there was like a film awards program that they were invited to, maybe they would show up. I don't know.
We hear you. And
Yes, please.
also, as a sequel, Dawn. You know, there's another edition of Dawn.
Yeah.
Would you ever, you know, sort of reach out and be a part of it? It's one of your favorite movies.
It is, and I'll throw this out there. I saw, I had dinner with my friend Arjun Basin, who's the costume designer on that, and Zoya, whose brother is obviously leading that. And I was like, oh heck yeah! Like, as a massive fan of that franchise, I'm so excited to see that. And if there was a cameo, I would not say no. I would be very cheap.
Okay.
I'd be like, yes, I'm going to come to do it. What's your lowest rate? I'll do it. I'm a big fan.
Awesome. Yes, please, gentlemen. Yeah.
Hi, this is also on. Sorry, you want me to stand? Okay. This is also on Harold and Kumar.
Sure.
I just wanted to get a sense of what was it like to first see the script. Okay. How did you warm to the script? Was the shooting script very different from the original script? Can you just give us something about the script writer?
Yeah, happy.
And your relationship with the person who played Harold, how did the chemistry develop? And give us a little bit of sense of the kind of fun you had while shooting that movie. Because we had a whole lot of fun watching it.
Thank you. We had a blast making it, and I'm glad that extended to your experience, because that was meaningful for us. Look, when I first read that script, I laughed out loud while reading it. And here's how deeply cynical I was at the time, by the way, and why I keep talking about goalposts moving is I met John Hurwitz, who's one of the 2 writers, at a mutual friend's birthday party. And that mutual friend introduced us and said, Kal, I had only done Van Wilder at that point and a movie called American Desi before that. And so they said, you should meet this guy, John Hurwitz. He wrote this script called Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle about Korean American and Indian American friends who go on a road trip together. And so the first thing John said to me was, whoa, you don't have an Indian accent. And I used some profanity and was like, oh yeah, well you're like a piece of, you know. And he goes, no, I didn't mean it that way. I meant like I saw your role in Van Wilder and I just assumed that you naturally had an Indian accent. And I was like, oh, okay, so you're giving me a compliment. That's different. And he goes, no, but the reason that I wanted to meet you and that I'm surprised that that's not your real voice is I wrote this script that our friend told us about. I'd love for you to read it. It's a road trip movie about 2 friends. And he explained it to me, and I said, all right, I mean, I don't see how you're ever going to get this made, because my experience was always like I had filmmaker friends. We talked about the people who were 5 to 40 years older than me, not just in the South Asian diaspora, but Asian American as a whole. And they had told me stories about scripts they wrote and they would send out and they would get feedback that said, if you just change all the Asian or Indian characters to being white or black, we'll buy it. You know, that kind of a thing. So I just thought they're going to have to do this. Then he sent me the script and I read it and I laughed out loud. I thought it was the funniest thing I'd ever read. And I called them and I said, look, you're obviously never going to be able to sell this to a movie studio. Let me call some like rich cardiologist uncles and like try to get some VC money to finance this thing. And John Hurwitz said to me, I appreciate that. I'm sorry that you've had these experiences. I want you to know that our intention is to make a movie called Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, not David and Jason Go to McDonald's. So like, we will sell this script and we will sell it to a studio and we are going to cast an Indian American and Korean American guy to play the lead roles. And he was right. The movie, when the script went out on the market, they sold it fairly quickly and then began this really long casting process because like I was saying, there's no shortage of actors to play the roles we played. And so John and I get cast. And, you know, we had all these chemistry reads, and when we shot the film in Toronto, in Canada, and John knocked on my apartment door, we were staying in the same building. He said, hey, man, we actually need to be, you know, we play best friends, lifelong friends in the movie. Do you want to go out for a drink? Let's get to know each other. And that first drink that we had, we basically were like, so what did you think of when you read this script? And I said, I thought it was the funniest thing that I've ever read. And I thought that the 12-year-old me would be so excited. And he had a phrase like that also. I think he called it, or no, I called it the middle school me. He called it the 12-year-old me. Because when I was, you know, 13 years old, all I had was Mira's film with Sarita and Denzel Washington to point to. That's it. It's like it would be unbelievable that somebody my age would have that opportunity. And so from then on, it was just like the best time. He's the nicest guy. It really helped that I think we had the same philosophy about why this was special to us. But it was just, I had such a blast making it. Loved all three experiences. This is why I'm really excited that we'd have the chance to do a fourth film. And he's just, the character is cooler than me. He's just less nerdy than I am. I want to play him again.
Awesome. Yes, please, the gentleman here. Can I just get a show of hands so I know how to pace the rest? Or?
I'll make my answer shorter too, I'm sorry.
Yeah, my name is Deepak Sethi and I'm changing the tune to politics.
Sure.
You know, I want to ask you something significant that you said. You said the Democrats got their messaging wrong in terms of, you know, people wanting their groceries to be cheaper and a lot of other things. Did I get you right on that?
No, I think they think they got their messaging wrong. I think they also got their policies wrong.
Yeah.
They didn't have a plan to address the affordability crisis in the same way that like a Bernie and AOC as are on candidates or elected officials like that.
Sure. So the point you were making is that they could have made some mid-course correction or whatever it is.
Yes.
Yeah. My point is that the Democratic narrative and the Republican narratives are quite clear. I mean, say,
Yes.
Democrats are clearly liberal in every sense, showed in healthcare, civil liberties, climate and care.
Yep.
And the Republicans are MAGA. You know, it's Make America Great Again. Everything stems to that.
Yeah.
How easy would it have been for any Democrat campaign to actually change, you know, to the right kind of tonality and all, given that they have a very basic position that they've already taken, which is what makes them what they are?
It's a great question. You know, Republicans have always been really good at cohesive party structure. So no matter what the party says, that's what you do. Everybody falls in line, with rare exception. So you're right about that. The Democrats have generally been what's called a large tent. You've got conservative Democrats, and then you have a handful of really progressive ones, like the ones I just mentioned. I don't think that the issue was that they needed to replicate anything Republicans were doing. I think they tried too hard to do that. I think that they saw, they took the bait on these fake wokeism things that Republicans were trying to drum up and sort of said, oh, people are going to worry about which bathroom is somebody using. You got to go to the bathroom, use the bathroom. Like, what's the big deal, right? Why are we taking the bait on that? And you're taking air away from real conversations about how am I going to make your rent bill more affordable? What are we going to do from this job loss with AI that's coming? Why are gas prices so high? What are we doing about the climate crisis? These are things that voters really do care about, but I don't think Democrats had a plan or a strategy on attacking them. And I think the things that they acquiesced on, and maybe this is the candidates themselves, to your point, like, you know, of course, Republicans have been way more aggressive on things like attacking free speech. But Biden and Harris were no friend of free speech on college campuses, right? They were quite similar to what you saw in the beginning of what Trump was doing, and that's obviously evolved quite a bit in a way that didn't exist in the previous administration. But if you give a little, I think it opens up the door to further regression that I would love to not see. And I just think there are other solutions. You have so many candidates, so many people in these leadership positions on the left who are offering that solution. So I'm still hopeful that we learn from that. I just don't know the degree to which that'll happen.
Is there one thing or that one moment you feel like, you know, you would have wanted voters to learn that this is the reason you should be fighting for free speech? Because I find those moments getting tougher and tougher to communicate in India. You know, I keep hearing people saying, I want to move to Dubai, I want to move to Singapore to get a better job. And
for free speech, you want to move to Dubai?
No. They want to move to Dubai because they don't care about free speech.
Okay.
They don't care about free speech, they want to move to Singapore. So
I got you.
Just the kind of sanctity or the kind of space that the almost militant fight for free speech that you see in Europe, I guess because of the World War, it's still fresh in their minds. You don't see that happening in necessarily other parts of the world, is my view. I thought you saw it in America, but even in America, it was getting tested.
I can only speak to my experience, and the timeline for us is like, yeah, I grew up in the 80s, 90s kind of a space where free speech was revered. You had Cold War, post-Cold War, so the narrative was also America as a beacon of free speech. So and I'm an artist, so my philosophy is always tied up in, I could really find it abhorrent, some of the things that we're seeing out there, whether it's, you know, like we know homophobia, anti-LGBT rhetoric, the evils of anti-Semitism. These are awful things that I have a real problem with, whether they're said by stand-up comedians, whether they're said by activists or politicians. I mean, these are awful things that I think any reasonable person would say, this is a real problem that we need to address. I think the purist side of the idea of free speech also for me goes back to the free market will correct that, because most people are not anti-LGBT. Thankfully, most people are not anti-Semitic. Most people are not anti-trans, if you really get down to people's human values. And I think that when you rally around and build these coalitions, you're seeing these coalitions really come together to simultaneously defend free speech and go against this awful rhetoric of what it means to truly be anti-Semitic, anti-LGBT, homophobic. So I think there's a way to beat back all of that right-wing ideology with free speech, not the contrary.
And I'll end with this. If you were asked by the Republican Party, okay, to help them find a candidate who could defeat Trump,
Yeah.
would you take it?
I mean, paisa bawa pe chicken eh? No. I think there are so many, those are going to be lots
Hypotheticals.
of hypothetical. There are going to be lots of conversations like that. I have friends who are political consultants. It's not something that I do.
Okay.
I'm like literally mostly an actor.
Okay.
I love this space that I occupy. I don't have any desire to go back into politics full time.
And going back in politics, do you think it helped or hurt or made no difference to your career as an actor?
No, I don't think it
It made no difference.
made a difference
you
in that
could
way.
take a pause and come back just right easily.
I don't know easily. I think you're mindful. Like I sort of liken it to athletics a lot. Like when athletes take a break, like all right, you could be out for a season with an injury, but if you're out for 4 seasons, you're not really coming back to the same level that you were at. And so, it's also something that I care about, right? So had I not worked in politics, I don't think I would have been up for the Daily Show hosting gig. I had the chance to guest host for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Ultimately, they brought back Jon Stewart. Can't argue with that. He's the OG, genius at what he does. But I wouldn't have had the chance to guest host that. I've done a couple of docuseries for Amazon, a climate series for Bloomberg. A lot of the speaking gigs that I do with like VCs and entrepreneurs and in the corporate space would not have had the chance to do if I hadn't worked in politics. So I don't kind of view it that way. I think it opened up new opportunities. I don't think anybody was offering me like an overly sexed weed guy right out of the White House, but that's okay too. You know, there was a buffer, and then now we're making more of those movies again. Yeah.
I cut you off. You were saying something in the middle.
No. That's I'm deeply appreciative of the opportunities that I've had, of the shoulders of the people I stand on, but then also just the audiences that have supported my book, that have asked the questions, that feature me on talks like this, and for all of you who showed up, I appreciate
And
it.
we're very deeply appreciative of you. I remember I don't know how old I was, but I remember loving Harold and Kumar.
Oh,
We were
man,
watching it with
thank
so
you.
many people. I was a big, I remember the big gang watching it, and we kind of watched it more than once. And it was, it's just, there's a certain authenticity you bring to all the work that you do. As an audience, I want to tell you that. And
Thank you.
And really grateful for that, and just thank you for subconsciously being a very sort of a liberal ambassador of India in your own way, without knowing it, I think. But you've been very
Thank you. I definitely don't see myself that way. I love talking to people who disagree with me about
Yeah.
everything. I mean, you know, if you look at the Guju WhatsApp family group chat, it's very the opposite of everything I've said.
Yeah.
So that's okay too.
We all have those.
Like we all
family
have those.
chats,
We
yeah.
should be able to have those vibrant conversations with people we love and people we disagree with. So
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for being here, and thank you, and more power to you.
thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for the fabulous session. May I request Anant to present a token of appreciation? Request everyone to please remain seated. This illustration is by Sunish K. Thank you. I now invite Mr. Saurabh Bhumik, Vice President Radico, to present Penn with a bouquet. Thank you, Mr. Bhumik. I request you to please remain on this stage. I would like to invite our partners, Ashish Pathe from Vaman Hari Pathe Jewellers and Stefan from Jolie's, to join us for a group photograph. Yeah. I'm sorry, it is Vaman Hari Pethe. Thank you, everyone. And as we conclude, we would like to thank our partners, presenting partner Radico Khaitan, co-presenting partner Adani, associate partner Vaman Hari Pethe Jewellers, experienced partner Jolie's. Please stay back and join us for cocktails at Cannery.